Okay. So we'll start that again and say, welcome to tonight's meeting, which is a public meeting under the Planning Act for a zoning bylaw amendment asked for by Shay Jor Gao. If I've got that wrong, I apologize. Tonight's meeting is being videotaped for those people who may want to see it again and for those that couldn't make it. So we ask that all of you put your PDAs or cell phones onto silent so as not to interrupt the taping of tonight's meeting. It will be available within 48 hours of tonight's meeting on our website. It is a YouTube video, so you'll be able to click onto that and see tonight's meeting. Okay, so the purpose of tonight's meeting, thank you. Now, there's going to be a variety of opinions. So before I go into this, there may be a variety of opinions tonight. We ask that you refrain from any kind of outward either clapping, cheering, or booing, because there will be a difference of there will be differing opinions being brought forward. This is a technical report with a recommendation report and/or other reports required with regard to this application in the future. So we just ask that. We understand there's emotions on both sides, but we would ask that we, for civility, that we all refrain from any kind of outward outbursts. Thank you. Okay, so the purpose of this public meeting is to consider a zoning bylaw amendment application. The Planning Act requires that under Section 3412, that before passing a zoning bylaw, council must hold at least one public meeting for the purpose of informing the public in respect of this amendment. The purpose of this public meeting is to receive comments and answer questions from the public regarding the amendment to the Township of West Lincoln's zoning bylaw. At this point, no decision has been made on the proposed amendment, and any comments received tonight will be taken into account by committee and council prior to their consideration. The Planning Act further requires through Section 34 sub 13 that council advise the public that if any person or public body does not make an oral submission at this public meeting or make a written submission to the Township of West Lincoln before the bylaw is passed, that person or public body is not entitled to appeal the decision of council from the Township of West Lincoln to the Ontario Municipal Board. Madam Clerk, would you please advise of the method and dates by which notice of this public meeting was given?
Proper notice was given by way of individual notice dated June 22nd, 2017.
Thank you very much. Okay. Mr. Director, I see that you're on deck to give us an understanding of the purpose and reason for the zoning, bylaw amendment.
Thank you, Madam Chair. This application affects one parcel of land in the Township of West Lincoln, and the description is 1374 Port Davidson Road, which is almost a 21-hectare farm parcel on the west side of Port Davidson Road, south of Silver Street. I say this property, or this rezoning, affects one property, and I do that for the reason that I want to mention the fact that in March of 2014, Council passed a zoning bylaw amendment to attempt to give some guidance and direction to how to deal with medical marijuana facilities that may come forward in our township. And that was precipitated at that time due to changes in the federal government's rules, which allowed Health Canada to permit individual companies to produce marijuana for medical purposes. This is the first application that council has now seen under those zoning bylaw provisions that were put in place in 2014. Staff have had a number of inquiries of different potential locations for facilities, but this is the first one that has actually made it to the point of an application for rezoning for consideration by council. So in 2014, the rules that were put in place were fairly strong in the sense that it required a large setback from boundary lines of adjacent parcels. The requirement at that time was on 150 meters, with the intent being to try and force a developer to have to find the location of a fairly large parcel so that the setbacks were fairly self-contained. The 150 meters then forced a distance away, and it was on the property of the applicant that those restrictions were put in place. This particular property at 21 hectares, and given its shape, does actually achieve those requirements, and I'm not sure if the deputy clerk can pull up the map that's on the laptop. That shows the proposed site plan. So with the measurements shown in the red lines, the area where the proposed facility is shown meets 150 meters from all of the adjacent property boundaries. The proposal as presented to date is for 5,000 square meters of building in 15 different hooped type structures for the growing of the medical marijuana. There are additional regulations that were put in place in the bylaw from 2014 around what to do in the event that there is lighting, especially lighting that lights up the sky at night. There's requirements for security fencing and board-on-board screen fencing as well as part of the existing bylaw. So, Madam Chair, this application tonight being considered is to allow for a facility of the medical marijuana nature on 1374 Port Davidson Road, and this is the first opportunity for consideration of public concerns. The staff report, Madam Chair, includes a number of written items of correspondence that were received prior to the completion of the staff report, and there are two additional items that have come in subsequent to that, and I believe Council has these items of correspondence at their locations, but if I may, I'll read them into the record. Tammy McPhee of 6513 Vaughan Road West states as follows: I oppose the rezoning of the property in the above-mentioned application. As a property owner adjacently south of this property, I am concerned that access to 1374 Port Davidson Road will be sought through my property by undesired elements looking to obtain product for the illicit drug trade or for self-indulgence. No matter how high or strong the fence may be, potential thieves will find a way to access the facility, and my concern is that they will do it via my property where there is cover of darkness at night. And the second item to be read into the record, Madam Chair, is from Rudy and Janine Carrick of Port Davidson Road. As residents of Port Davidson Road since 1999, we are writing the Township of West Lincoln with our concerns regarding the application for medical marijuana facility plan for 1374 Port Davidson Road, St. Anne's. Our concerns are as follows. With these establishments, it will bring illegal activity to the neighborhood, break-ins, thefts, etc. It is proven that property value drops when these establishments are built near homes. These establishments give off a pungent odor, which we have health and safety concerns about. We have young families in the area and are concerned for the safety of our children as well as our neighborhood. With that, Madam Chair, I'll turn it back to you at this time.
Thank you, Mr. Tribble. At some point prior to the conclusion of this public meeting, if you might be able to give us the current state, I know it's in your report, but before we get to that, if you could give us the process that's been outlined and what we're allowed to regulate versus, in fact, not by the federal government as well as the provincial government.
Okay.
But I'll leave that until a bit later. Okay, is the applicant or his authorized agent here this evening wishing to speak to this item? Sir, if you'd come forward to the microphone and state your name.
Thank you, Chair. First of all, allow me to introduce myself. I am not the applicant. My name is Rudy Houselow, and I work for Paul Bullers Manufacturing. Our company sold Mr. Gale the greenhouses that he plans on building on this property that we're discussing tonight. Mr. Gale, who lives in Markham, does not speak English, and his son, who is interpreting on his behalf, cannot be here tonight, so they pleaded with me to attend the meeting on their behalf. So here I am. Anyways, when he purchased the greenhouses, I told him that he needed to go to the township office and apply for a building permit. You understand, these are recent immigrants, and they have no idea how the system works. They were under the impression that greenhouses belong on land zoned agricultural, so getting a permit for them was as simple as applying, paying a fee, and being on with the building. At that point, I took the initiative, because I recognize this could go sideways from other projects I've done. I took the initiative and called the township office on behalf of them and arranged for a pre-consultation meeting to find out what was required for the permit. At the end of that meeting, the planner made a comment that if the greenhouses were to be used for marijuana growing, a zoning change was required, and the setback distances were greater. After that meeting, I asked Mr. Gale specifically what he was growing, and he told me it was indeed marijuana. That is when we redid the site plan and applied for the zoning change, which brings us here tonight. Do you have anything else that you want from me at this point?
This is a public meeting where comments from the applicant or his representative, which is who you are, is about explaining the process and the intentions of the applicant and how they plan to address the issues of the people who are going to speak, any comments that have been put forward in writing, and for you to hear information before we bring forward a technical report and or anything further. This may be the only public meeting, and for your client, this is your opportunity to let us understand how he plans to proceed. So that's all the ball in your court. You might be able to tell the people here this evening whether or not, in fact, Mr. Gayo has a license as yet, or has he applied for a license for the facility.
To be honest with you, I never asked him that. I would assume he would, otherwise we would not proceed to the extent where he has. Obviously, we spent a lot of money to get to this point, and again, these people are totally unaware of how the bureaucracy works as far as the building permits and
I don't want to lead you any further. There may be questions from the public. The next people to speak will be members of the public and ultimately the people around this table. So if you make yourself available, if there's any questions that we may want to direct to you, that's fine. But the floor, this was your opportunity to speak. So thank you very much. Mr. Howard, did you say? Howerson, thank you. Not for me, for the clerk. Okay. Are there any other people wishing to speak? This is now the public's chance to come forward to the microphone. And are there any oral or written submissions from anyone present regarding the proposed zoning amendment? At this point in time, this may be the only opportunity for the public to speak with regard to this application, and this may be the only public meeting that we have. And again, I stress that if you should wish to if this matter proceeds to the OMB, if you have not spoken at a public meeting, you may not be able to take your matter further to the OMB. So I look now for members of the public wishing to come forward. Please come forward, state your name. For the record.
My name is Lisa Jansen, and I live at 6533 Vaughan Road, and my property is directly adjacent to the property in question. Dear Council and members of West Lincoln, I have spent some time researching information about medical marijuana in order to make a fair decision on my stance in regards to the request to rezone the property directly adjacent to my property. I have learned that marijuana, or cannabis, is the most widely used illegal drug in the world, and although it contains beneficial medicinal properties, the ill effects and damage it can cause to normal, healthy people cannot be denied. That is why it was included in the 1923 Opium and Narcotics Drug Act and continues to be included within the United Nations drug control regime. It is no ordinary plant, and as such, should not be treated in the same manner as any agricultural or horticultural plant or crop. Its desirability by many average, unscrupulous individuals or misguided youth pose a higher than normal risk of theft and other associated criminal activities that put the residents of this community, and more profoundly, those nearest to this business, at great risk. As it stands, Health Canada allows municipalities to make decisions in the requirements it wishes to see in such businesses located within its borders. I appreciate Council's increased setback requirements and the requirement of a security fence, but my research would suggest that these measurements are not sufficient. Although Health Canada has many good precautions in place currently, I worry that these precautions will be thrown out the door should our federal government be foolish enough to legalize recreational use, and our community will be negatively impacted if we have this business within our community. Rural settings in general are more difficult to guard and police, and any homeowners located near such businesses have an increase of risk of possible criminal activities on or around their properties, as well as an increased exposure to people with immoral character. At 1.8 meter security fence is less than 6 feet high and does not seem to be a sufficient deterrent of possible criminal activity. I am also concerned that no guidelines appear to be enforced to require regular workers in such facilities to produce a security check, and that a security check is only required for supervisory staff and producers. Subsection C of the security measures currently listed by Health Canada state a producer's site must be designed in a manner that prevents unauthorized access and include visual monitoring at all times. It also requires that supervisory staff be always present at all handling of plant material. The current proposed site plan makes it difficult for a proper system of surveillance to be in effect and leaves it too vulnerable for theft of any kind or even dishonest practices to occur either by inside staff or the producer. Health Canada also states a licensed producer must produce, possess, package, and store all marijuana indoors only. The current proposed plan does not sufficiently satisfy this requirement, in my opinion, as the 15 separate greenhouses and the processing and storage warehouse are all separate buildings and are not in any way connected to one another. I am also concerned about what type of heating system will be utilized in this facility. If there are 16 separate buildings, then there will most likely be 16 separate heating systems, which would provide a great risk. Any heating system installed needs to be localized in one area within the facility and positioned far from all plant material to minimize risk of a malfunction which could result in contamination of the surrounding environment. A fire would result in residents being exposed to THC, the active ingredient in marijuana, one of only 483 known components of marijuana, of which 65 of them are carcinoids. Children and people with liver or heart conditions would be at greatest risk and may result in permanent damage to these individuals. For years, no one was aware of the damage secondhand tobacco smoke caused individuals who did not even smoke. Inherent to marijuana grow operations is the horrible smell that accompanies its production and processing. Health Canada states an air filtration system needs to be included in any facility, and I do not see under the current proposed plan how any filtration system can be installed to actively capture the smell or possible marijuana plant material, such as pollen, from escaping. There are just too many points of exit in this proposed plan, and residents living nearby could develop allergic reactions to the smell or pollen of marijuana. My husband already experiences allergies, and I have a strong sensitivity to odors, which at times causes headaches and a general feeling of unwellness. I'm also quite certain no one has given any thought to the possible impact of pollen collection of marijuana by honeybees, and this impact could take years to ever know. The risks associated with a marijuana grow facility are great and will most likely result in a devaluation of my property, making it impossible for me to relocate. As well, I am concerned of the possibility of property insurance companies will adopt increased costs to residents located near such facilities. I know that for residents residing in Stony Creek are required to pay higher rates because of the increased potential for accidents by auto insurance companies. Why should I or anyone else located near such a facility be subjected to increased criminal activity, potential health problems, and increased loss of money resulting in the lowering of the standard of living. If all the residents of West Lincoln were to be polled, I am confident the majority would not want such a business located within our township. And if forced to accommodate such a business, would like to see members of our community being involved in the requirements of such a business. It is my opinion council should implement more comprehensive guidelines for such businesses and consider that such businesses are better located in industrial areas where no neighboring properties are occupied by homeowners. At this time, I recommend council deny the application as proposed design indicates to me that Mr. Shea is unfamiliar with the concerns inherent to this business and demonstrates a lack of concern for the existing residents of this community. Mr. Shea has not followed health guidelines by properly formally notifying the township or the fire department to my knowledge. It is my opinion that any business wishing to locate in our township should have some kind of approval from Health Canada first to produce before any local changes occur. I am providing council with a few articles that I consulted with to form my opinion. Thank you for your time.
Thank you, Mrs. Jansen. If you could provide us with a copy of your presentation, that would be greatly appreciated by our clerk.
Would you like me to give that to you?
Sure, thank you. Thank you very much.
You're welcome.
Anyone else here present this evening wishing to speak to committee?
I'll say a word.
Again, if I could ask you to come forward and state your name.
My name is Ian Mead. Good evening. Very good information from the young lady who was there and the gentleman that spoke previously. From my standpoint, I haven't got a lot into it, but what I do know is my brother was involved in marijuana for a number of years, for medical reasons and for other people. And it's 2005 when 3 people broke into his house and shot him 6 times and put an axe in his head requiring 70 staples. By the luck of God, he survived. But that was all over 3 ounces of marijuana. I don't need to say anything else. Everybody here has a family, and everybody here has to live with that. And to me, we don't need that in our neighborhood. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Anyone else wishing to address committee?
Rudy Garrick. I live at 1185 Port Davidson Road. I'm very close to the location. I don't have anything formally written. The people before me had some good stuff to say. I just want to say I don't want any of this activity. I moved here to raise a family in this nice, quiet town. With this stuff coming in, it makes me nervous. I don't like the sound of it. It's nothing personal against those people. It's just that the activity is not good. I've done some research. There have been other grow-ups that received multiple break-ins and issues that way. I'm concerned about that. I'm concerned about the safety of my children, my family, and other people in my neighborhood and their children and families. So I just wanted to bring that forward. Just wanted to say something. So thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Carrick. Anyone wishing to speak to committee, this is the time to approach and to make your comments known. I'm going to say one more time that this may be the only public meeting with regard to this application that I can guarantee you. So if you wish to speak, this is the time. Mrs. Blagden?
I'm getting old. Takes me longer.
I've seen you walking up and down those roads pretty quick.
Once I get going, I'm okay. I haven't anything prepared. I don't approve of this in our neighborhood. We've lived here 37 years. And many times people have said, why are you living out there? We love living out here. We like the small town. We have our little church. This is comfortable for us. I'm not well, my husband is not well, and this is just up the road from us. And like my husband said,
we have two big dogs. But what kind of people is this going to bring in to our area? And the smell, I know for a fact, when I worked, where I worked, that marijuana smell is just as bad as if you took it. Because I was working on the line one day, and I was feeling really woozy, and I said to my coworker, I gotta go and sit down, because I'm diabetic, I'm on insulin, and I'm going low. She says, well, isn't that funny, my blood pressure must be going funny, because she couldn't have the chickens in the shackles, she couldn't see the shackles. But the boy who was bringing the chickens through the pucker onto the table for us to work on was up and away on marijuana. Needless to say, the inspector asked what was wrong with us, and I said, we're going to have to be, someone's going to have to take our place because we have to go sit down. The room is moving around. And I wasn't smoking it. But I was breathing it. And when you work in a chicken plant, you can't tell the difference between chicken guts and marijuana. So I didn't know what the smell was. But I was just standing there. I wasn't smoking, and I didn't really realize why my friend and I were going woozy. So the inspector came over, and he knew what happened. So needless to say, the place was shut down and aired, and that boy was sent home. But it's like Lisa said, the smell is in the air, and the kind of people. Jerry and I don't want to have to be up all night long patrolling our property because some idiot thinks we've got something there that they can sell so they can buy this stuff. And we don't feel like having to have a security system around our place. We have 8-foot fences now because we had deer. But we've even had some people come and try to steal things, but they can't. And our dogs always let us know when somebody's around. But we don't have to. My husband's 82 next month. I'm 73. We don't want to have to be up all night protecting our property from low lights. I'm quite sure, and like there's a beautiful home across the road from this, where this thing is going to go. And the value of it is going to go. And it seems ever since we moved here, it was a toxic waste dump, then there was some watershed we had to fight, then it was the railway track thing, then it was the turbines, then it was those stupid poles we got out front, and now it's marijuana. So could we have a break? Tell them to go put it somewhere else.
Thank you, Mrs. Blagden. Anyone else wishing to come forward? I'm going to ask one final time. Is there anyone else wishing to come forward to address committee?
I have a question, but it's not.
If you want to address committee, we may not be able to answer your question, but if you pose it, we'll try and find a response for you. This would be the time for you to come forward.
I'm Sunita, and I live at 6927 Alpha Road. And reading through the information we picked up and listening, what I'm not hearing is how much extra car traffic, transportation, trucks, what kind of extra activity are we going to have to deal with on Port Davidson? And what kind of activity are we going to have to deal with everywhere that we, it's a small road, it's busy as it is, so you're talking about a facility that's a business, and my question is, what are you looking at for all those trucks coming in at night, coming in the daytime, people, staff? So, I mean, that's what I'd like to know. I don't agree with it, I don't want it, but I mean, that's something that I'm not seeing addressed in everyone's question. So I don't know if anybody can answer that question, but it is a business, and business is not 24 hours a day sometimes.
It is, and unfortunately, the growing of cannabis is an agricultural business. And the conversion, Mr. Treble, help me if I'm wrong here, but the processing of cannabis is a value-added product, makes it a value-added product, which under the province of Ontario allows for that kind of ancillary use in an agriculturally zoned property. Am I correct, Mr. Treble?
You are correct with that,
Darn.
Madam Chair.
Thank you, but it's still my concern the traffic and what kind of trucks, so what are we getting, things like that.
So those kind of points are exactly what it is that we want to hear. What are the concerns that the candidate or the applicant wishes to put forward that needs to be addressed? So if we don't have that, we can certainly try to find out. Thank you for coming forward. Mr. Treble.
Perhaps, Madam Chair, just for the record and before the next person speaks, the planning process that we have established here in the township does require that should council grant approval of the zoning, there is a site plan process as well. So unanswered questions such as security and traffic certainly would have to get answered as part of that site plan process. We'll have a lot more detailed site plan at the end of the process than the ones on the screen from the applicant showing their preliminary thoughts on how to get the process started. But just, I thought I'd put that out there, Madam Chair, that there is an opportunity to get answers to a lot of those questions through the approval process.
Right.
Should council be prepared to go that way.
So now that you've opened the closet and McGilla might have jumped out, this is a preliminary public hearing. Then we come back with a report, and if you could explain what it is that happens, and then finally a site plan which details how the site will be populated. And ultimately, if there was an appeal, it could happen on what? Both the rezoning and site plan?
That's correct. There's appeal processes on both. So the process, Madam Chair, certainly requires a minimum of one public meeting. And I stress minimum since we don't have a lot of answers tonight and the applicants aren't necessarily completely represented here tonight. It may be that some further dialogue with the public will be warranted. That's something council should deliberate on. Answers to the kinds of questions that have been raised tonight, as well as a more detailed site plan, would certainly help everyone, public, council, as well as staff, understand more fully the nature of the application. Should council support the rezoning at some point, then there is an appeal process that's tied to that decision of council. Even if council chooses to deny the application, there is an appeal mechanism. Presumably only the owner or applicant would be interested in appeal at that point. And as I say, Madam Chair, there is a site plan process. The site plan process itself isn't normally a public process, but we certainly make it available should the public have an interest in seeing the application and providing input into the process. That site plan process requires approval and an authorizing bylaw and a report presented to Planning Committee prior to staff's recommendation for approval should we get that far. And there's a number of different factors that will have to be taken into consideration, such as the movement of trucks and the location of loading docks, as well as Lisa Jansen was talking about a number of different design features with the buildings, and clearly those will have to be spelled out. I understand there are filtration systems, there are requirements not to expose the product openly. It has to be self-contained, and all of that detail is certainly not before us at this particular point in time, and will be part of any detailed application, along with security requirements. And Health Canada certainly has some elaborate expectations, monitoring and videoing of the property as well that need to be taken into account. There was a question early on, Madam Chair, about whether or not this individual had a license. The way I read the Health Canada material, it appears that they require approval from us first. So I'm anticipating he doesn't, but I don't know that either. It's something else that would be helpful to find out if in fact Health Canada has taken any kind of position on this application. And certainly, Madam Chair, in the last point I think that I need to speak to is the appeal process for a site plan. Should council make a decision on a site plan, the applicant has an opportunity to appeal if he or she is not happy with the decision of council on the site plan. Did I miss any questions?
I think,
Madam Chair?
Mr. Treble, the fact that if council or committee were to want to change or create new zoning in town or new zoning requirements, this application is being heard under the existing zoning and would not necessarily prohibit this application from going through a process.
This application is using the criteria that were established in 2014, which were carried into the new bylaw. So the fact that the application does meet the setback requirements means that they warrant a public discussion and proper consideration by council. The rules in 2014, though, were established as minimum standards. So should there be reason to believe that the minimum is not an appropriate number in this particular location, that can lead to further dialogue. I think, though, based on the plan I saw, that the minimum is about all they can achieve with the amount of area they propose to put under greenhouse. So increased setbacks beyond that will cause some challenges to the client, I would assume, in this particular file.
Thank you, Mr. Treble. Okay, having heard those additional comments from our Director of Planning, are there any other members of the public wishing to come forward? One second, there's a gentleman coming just before you. Sorry. And I'm not trying to force you people to come forward, by the way. Just in case this is the only public hearing, I have to ask at least 3 times to make sure that you all have had an adequate chance to come forward. So, sir, your name?
Ken Martin, I live at 6800 Elko Road, and I saw the application come in my mailbox, and I immediately thought, what else is coming to West Lincoln? And I agree with the comments about the horrendous aerial poles, and we're the only township that seems to entertain that. You can see where it stops and goes underground as it gets into Beamsville. But I moved here in 2008 as a retirement, my retirement home, my downsizing, and I wish I hadn't, because I was in Pelham and I would have been safe if I'd stayed there, I guess. But I do wonder what else. When I came in here today, I thought about this in terms of the aesthetic issues, but I never ever considered the security. I didn't really consider the smell until I talked to somebody who was actually in one of these in another location in the Niagara Peninsula, and he is applying himself for a grow up, and he advised me that the smell is very, very substantial when the plants are blooming, which is when they harvest. And the other thing that I would like to say is that the very fact that this applicant isn't here tonight tells me something that you may have difficulty enforcing things. And obviously, there's a language barrier, but there seems to be a lack of concern, because I think they would have had somebody here rather than their supplier to represent them, who actually has a conflict of interest because he's selling the material to them.
Just the greenhouse, sir.
Huh?
Just the greenhouse.
Yeah,
Okay.
he's selling
Right.
the greenhouse to them.
Yeah.
He's got a stake in it. I guess the last thing I'd like to, the security issues that were brought up, I never dreamed that there would be a fence around that entire property. And I think this council has an obligation to the residents here. And obviously this operator of this marijuana facility is in it for the dollars. We're in it for the lifestyle. And I just think that I hope the council makes a wise decision on our behalf. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Martin. I'll entertain your return with a comment, although we usually limit it to once at the microphone, so go for it.
It's all the parts of the marijuana plant that can be utilized in producing product. So I think our township needs to also know what kind of marijuana product is he harvesting? Is he harvesting the buds only? Is he harvesting and drying the plant material?
producing cannabis liquid, which has its own type process in order to make that. So those are things that we as a township should take into consideration as well as knowing what those are.
Thank you very much. Okay, seeing no one else wishing to come forward to the microphone, I'm going to restrict this meeting to the table at this point in time. Do any members of the committee have any comments? Councillor Bell?
At the appropriate time, I'd like to make a recommendation on this issue.
Sir, this is a public meeting.
I realize when
Yeah.
it goes to the,
We would go,
That's right.
we would do that when the report comes forward in
That's
the,
right.
in the
I
council
just want you
agenda.
to know, that's all.
Okay. I got Councillor Bill's Masori. I apologize, and I'll come right away around this way.
Thank you very much. Again, like many of the residents, I have grave concerns. One, the concerns that I have that I wanted to raise at this time. This would be licensed as a medicinal marijuana grow operation, and my concern is how simple or flexible or easy would it be for this to become a run-of-the-mill marijuana or recreational marijuana facility? Is that a different process? When we dealt with it in the bylaw, we were dealing with a medical marijuana situation because that was the only thing that was legal. And on the horizon, there's much discussion about recreational marijuana use in our nation. Not very pleased with the discussion, but the fact of the matter is that if recreational marijuana use does become quite mainstream, can this facility just merely open the doors wide open? And so I'm kind of concerned
Let me
about-
see if I can get you an
Yeah,
answer on that
yeah.
one. Mr. Treble, are you aware of the steps that it would take to turn a medical marijuana plant into a recreational marijuana facility, or is that something we'd have to get an answer for?
Through you, Madam Chair, at this particular point in time, I don't know that the rules with respect to the recreational growing have necessarily been ironed out. I've been talking with a number of other municipalities and trying to keep on top of documentation that the federal government releases, and there's not a lot of detail yet. In fact, there seems to be an indication that the rollout in 2018 might be pushed off to 2019 or so, just because of the fact that there's a lot of unanswered questions in terms of process. So unfortunately, I can't answer that tonight.
So you understand where my concern is. Basically, I see this as a kind of an opportunistic type venture, simply one that they're positioning themselves to kind of get ahead of the curve. And I don't want to make an accusation or anything of the sort, but I'm very concerned that there's probably a massive increase in these types of operations pending an outcome that might be favorable to recreational use, and then they can just kind of simply flip over. And I think then it really plays into the concerns of the many residents that this will become a target for criminal activity and the like. So that's right off the bat one of my first and chief concerns at this time. So,
Thank you, Councillor Bilsma. Mayor Joyner.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Just to kind of piggyback on one of your questions that you asked earlier of the director, and the question was, what are we allowed to regulate at this time?
Oh, sorry, Mr. Treble, if you're waiting for me, go ahead.
Yeah, through you, Madam Chair. We can regulate with respect to land use matters, so I think it's safe to say that the questions around transportation and location and lighting and those kind of things are certainly items worthy of site plan discussion to ensure compatibility and appropriate establishment of rules. Things like security certainly seem to be established and documented very extensively by Health Canada. So I think there's a lot of dictating in terms of the videoing of the property at all times and the monitoring and all of that kind of stuff. So I don't know that we can tread too far into that particular territory. But before we get that far, I intend to consult with Township Legal Counsel just to sort of be clear in terms of where that division stops between the role of the township versus the feds as well. It's clear that they have to comply with zoning, but how far we can take that beyond sort of traditional land use stuff is not very clear in the language to date.
Thank you, Madam Chair. My next question, Mr. Treble, is that we have two places that we can put a medicinal marijuana facility that is listed in our bylaw. One is an agricultural, and the other one is M1 or industrial. So it could go into our industrial park. My question to you is, does the minimal distance setback that we've established have to be the 150 meters as well in an M1 zoning?
Through you, Madam Chair, in the M1 zoning, the proposed setback of the bylaw in 2014 was 45 meters from any residential or institutional use on an adjacent lot.
Thank you. And I guess my next question would be, is that I've heard that the next round of marijuana processing growing plants, and this is when the actual federal government chooses to decriminalize this in 218, you're suggesting maybe 219. Is it not true that the actual minimum requirements may be less than what we actually have in our bylaw? And the reason for that being is that every person will be able to grow their own pot plants for recreational use, and I understand it to be somewhere in the area of 4 to 6. So have you heard the same, is that the minimal amount of security and all the things that we talk about in our bylaw could be decreased at that time?
Through you, Madam Chair. The document that I have been able to sort of read up on is a task force report to the government that was led by Anne McClelland, dated November of 2016. And it certainly appears to suggest that there may be basis to lessen the requirements. But that's all the details, just a recommendation to the government, no clear indication of what the government's going to do, if anything, on that front yet.
So I guess my conclusion would be that perhaps maybe in picking up on what Councillor Balsma has said, if in fact the proponent is hoping to get into the game now, if we can call it that, with the medicinal marijuana facility, we will have already imposed a stringent set of guidelines and setbacks and stipulations that perhaps if the proponent does choose to change over at that time, those particular guidelines that we put in place would already be there on this facility. Is that a fair assumption?
Through you, Madam Chair, yeah, that's certainly a fair assumption. There are, as I think it was Ms. Jansen referred to, these are not greenhouses, but yet there are a lot of municipalities that have treated them like greenhouses. We've done far better than that in terms of the setback requirements. So perhaps we're in a better position. I would agree with that.
Thank you. Councillor Trombetta.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Yeah, just listening to everyone tonight, kind of processing all this information. Yeah, it does disturb me a bit too that, you know, we have somewhat of an owner's representative coming tonight, not an owner's coming tonight to tell us and to say that he's unaware of all the procedures in place and all the guidelines that are in place. Makes me leery in these sort of circumstances. I'm not in support of this. I'm just going to pretty much be straight out. I don't need to find out guidelines or whatever. I'm just not in support of this. It worries me some that if something like this does come, will this be a hot spot for more to come? And it worries me as such. So I'm just going to straight out say I'm not in support of it. I don't need to know any information about it. right at the moment, because again, I'm not in support, and, I just only got one question, and that's to, you know what, no, I don't need information. I'm not in support, that's it, done.
Thank you. Councillor Rayner.
Thank you, Madam Chair. One thing that's important to me when people come to make application, even if they don't speak, is that they be here. That to me says a lot, whether they have a representative speaking on their behalf because they're either not good with the language or they're not good in conveying their thoughts or they're uncomfortable, they're nervous. Whatever the case, they're still here. This particular case, as the original gentleman mentioned, these people are recent immigrants. Obviously, they have a fair bit of money they're bringing to the country and they wanted to invest it. The part that I don't understand is Markham is a long ways away. Why not invest it in some agricultural facility around Markham? Why come all the way to Niagara? Which is one question I would have asked the individuals had they been here, but they're not even showing up. The concerns raised by the residents to me are very justified, and obviously it is a big concern that this could result in other situations. I know myself in the past, I've had my property surveyed and part of it was woods, and the funny thing was the surveyor said to me, he said, there's this truck, it's got its lights on, and it's 200 or 300 yards down the road, and it's stayed there most of the day. He said, when I went in the woods farther to do more surveying work, I found these pots. And he said the funny thing was, when I came back the next day to finish my surveying, the truck wasn't there and the pots were all gone. So we all know that this stuff is going on in the township of West Lincoln, either in cornfields or in woods, and the owners of the properties don't even know what's going on. And that in itself probably has some criminal activity to it. But this is blatant, and this is something that really goes against, as a lot of people said, the enjoyment of their land, the reason they come to West Lincoln. They want the privacy, they want the quiet, and they want the safety of feeling comfortable in an area that they know is a nice area and has a very low crime rate. And this really has done nothing to reinforce that. If anything, it's made people extremely uncomfortable. So like other people around this table, I personally would not support this, Madam Chair, and I would have difficulty proceeding with this any further, regardless of the federal government's direction. It's just, to me, I mean, this individual isn't even from this area. I mean...
But we're tonight in a public meeting looking for questions that have to be answered to fulfill the process of a public meeting. And subsequent to a public meeting, we'll have the chance to make our decisions, because we're open-minded till we get through this public meeting.
Well, I'm open-minded to a point, but then with all this that's coming down, and none of it is positive, and none of it in the past has been positive, it's very difficult to see this turning around when the individual who wants to do this couldn't even take the time to come here, regardless if there's a language problem. It doesn't mean you couldn't have an interpreter with you, and have somebody, as one gentleman said, I believe it was Mr. Martin, that said that it appears to be a conflict of interest when somebody who is actually part of the process of buying some of the equipment necessary is speaking on their behalf.
You know,
That doesn't come across well either.
Councillor, I believe that that's almost right to have a second public meeting, is so that we can have the questions posed to the actual applicant through an interpreter or whatever, but to get the answers we need. So.
I don't disagree with you. I think that is a good idea. I think another public meeting would be required, because in this particular case, if this individual is still serious, I'd like to see this individual here. Point blank. I mean, I don't care if it's an interpreter, not an interpreter. If you're serious enough of wanting to come to the township of West Lincoln for whatever, regardless of whatever agricultural business you're going to be in, you should at least be present in this process to show good faith. And that is not good faith, is what's going on right now. So that again creates suspicion, which already is suspicious with regards to the product they're trying to grow. So two wrongs in this case really don't even come close to making a right. Thank you.
Gotcha, Councillor. Councillor Trombetta?
Yeah, thank you, Madam Chair. Just curious, why is there another public meeting required? Like, I think duly information was given to this representative to attend this. I'm quite sure this wasn't a letter mailed. I'm saying a letter wasn't just mailed out this week, and I'm quite sure a substantial notice was given to the applicant. I don't think there is need for another public meeting. Why? If it was such, if it's, and the reason why I'm saying why I don't think there is, if it's such a big, important thing for this individual, wouldn't you think this be the time to have, not a supplier, at least something to represent him? But obviously that didn't cross the individual's mind, so why are we giving a second chance? I feel like we're giving a second chance.
Councillor Trombetta, I totally agree with you, and I understand completely, but as chair of this public meeting and this quasi-judicial kind of process, we sit in these public meetings to allow for all members of the public to give us their concerns, so that we can make a fulsome decision, and so that if it's taken out of our hands, and I'll turn this to Mr. Treble at the appropriate moment, but if we don't do that, then the applicant can say we didn't listen to everyone, and he can take us directly to the OMB, which takes the whole decision-making out of our hands. So the reason I'm being very careful and cautious this evening is to make sure that a second public meeting will prolong the application process, but it will ensure that we have a rightful hearing if someone chooses to go to the OMB because of our opinion.
And I understand you, Madam Chair.
It doesn't mean you'll have to change your mind.
No, I'm not going to. I'm just saying.
I'm just telling you.
I understand, but tonight we have always one public meeting for one thing, and then once that is said, and then we go from there, right? But I'm just saying, why entertain a second public meeting? The ample opportunity for tonight was for tonight.
Oh, well, then, in that case, I'm going to ask Mr. Treble, but we have an option to go to a second public meeting if answers aren't here. Normally, your first public meeting allows for the expedition of an application.
So if my colleagues around the table want extra answers, then we have to go to a second.
And if they don't get it answered at the second one, you can hold a third one.
Okay.
So
I'm just being, they're
Yes.
just asking, and I'm just saying I'm not in favor of a second.
Mr. Treble, if I've done any of that wrong, could you please correct it?
I don't think, Madam Chair, there's anything to correct. I fully agree. I think it's very important that not only do council, but the public and the applicant all at the end of this process feel like they had a full opportunity for discussion and understanding. That may not change the position, but then there is no way of going to the board and saying, I wasn't given a fair hearing. That would be the worst way to fight a hearing at the board, and the fact that process wasn't followed. It's better to fight it on the merits of the application or the merits of the decision.
And since we're there, the OMB changing the discretionary powers of the the province, there is more of a chance for us to mediate a discussion that if this isn't going to fly, and if we are all against it, the applicant has an understanding of how we all feel and may find it to be a cheaper, faster, more expeditious process to work with us through mediation than to proceed with something that may have been wrongly undertaken due to the lack of understanding of our rules. So all I'm trying to do is get us to a place where the next step still keeps the ball in our court. Is that fair? Mr. Treble.
Just to follow up on that, Madam Chair, and not to belabor anything, there's no question the changes to the OMB rules are to make sure that council deals with the matter properly at the local level. Right. And if there isn't proper decision, or if there isn't a decision with fulsome understanding, the OMB is likely to punt it back before they're going to deal with the files. So the days when council can sort of say, oh, I don't want to deal with that and punt it off to the OMB are behind us. That option's not really there anymore. This council will have to deliberate and give a fulsome decision.
Right. So we can't even deny it and hope that they can make the bad decisions for us. That's why I get paid the big bucks. No. Sorry. I knew that was coming. Did you like that one, Councillor Rayner? Thank you. Councillor Trombetta, I didn't mean to cut you off. Is there other questions other than the frustration?
Chair, thank you very much.
And I hope that the levity was accepted in that way, because I too feel and share your frustration.
Thank you.
Okay. Councillor Bilsma.
Thank you very much. One more question that kind of arose, and it stems from my first question. Is there a way that we could stall the process to see what the federal government...
It's not a good word, Councillor. But you mean you want to look extensively at the process to ensure that?
No, I'm not thinking of filibuster or anything like that, but more of because we are as a nation in a state of flux. I'd hate to.
But we're not MPs. You got to understand, we're only councillors here.
But if there's a trickle-down thing, we might make a decision that A could be trumped by a higher level of government.
Bad word,
Bad word, he's another.
Oh,
but it's
sorry.
okay.
Sorry, my fault.
Thumped would be like.
Thumbs,
how's
yeah,
that?
well, I'm a euchre player. I like hearts too. We could be making a decision that could be overturned by a decision made by higher level government, or we might be caught unawares, whatever. We don't know, since we are in this situation with our federal government making overtones and movement to restructure its views on marijuana, it might be prudent for us to just wait and see. And so I don't know how you would go about doing that, or whether there's an official process where we just table this, indefinitely until the federal government makes a decision, or
I think, Mr. Councillor,
so that's
the
my
thing
question.
to remember that we have so many days, 190, I believe, after a completed application,
120.
120, I apologize, 120 days after a complete application is submitted to the township to be able to deal with this. So we're holding a public meeting so that we can,
Yeah.
we, under the rules of today that we're required to operate under, we're handling the situation. I believe the idea of a second public meeting, because of the lack of presence of the applicant, is justifiable, and there's other means and measures, and there's a process that we have to go through and that the applicant will have to go through if we can't come to a resolve. But we can't table this until the federal government brings down legislation, no.
That was just my ask.
Yeah, no, it's a great idea, but not. I have a couple of questions that I don't want to leave the item with, and one of them is that this application is asking for the entirety of the land to be rezoned, Mr. Treble?
Through you, that is correct, but clearly it would be site-specific and would identify setbacks and location a
But
little bit.
that's my point, is how can we rezone the entirety of the project, of the facility, given 21 hectares, and still meet the requirements of property line, property lines? So if you rezone it, you're actually giving him permission zoning-wise to put greenhouses within the limits of where he would encroach within what our zoning bylaw says, right?
Except that the setback of 150, Madam Chair, is part of the zone.
Ah, okay. That truly was troubling me, and I wondered if that compromised his application at all. I guess that's the only meaningful one that I have, other than the other questions have been asked by my colleagues around the table, and the answers that you gave to us already about the fact that this is part of a process, an elaborate process, that we still have a number of steps to walk through. So, and a mediation process that's before us if Mr. Gayo insists on moving forward. This application, just before we go off to the more technical words I have to use, this application does appear in a report that will be dealt with later outside the public meeting, which is where I believe Councillor Bell wishes to put his recommendation forward, and that would be appropriate, and I'd probably second it at that time. So anyway, I would say that at this point, if my colleagues have finished with their submissions for this evening, that this is a technical report that is being considered by Planning Committee this evening, and that a recommendation report or further public meeting will be forthcoming to a future Planning Committee and ultimately to Council. Please be advised that once Planning Committee and/or Council have made a decision with respect to the zoning bylaw amendment, if approved by Council, a notice of its passing will be circulated with an appeal period. There is an attendance sign-in sheet which is located on the table near the exit doors, which we would ask all present to sign. Please ensure that when signing the attendance sheet for this evening's meeting, that you place a check mark in the column marked Shay Gayo if you wish to be advised of any subsequent meetings and/or decisions on this matter. Now, therefore, people who are interested in observing council and/or committee discussions about a particular bylaw should not solely rely on mailed notices and thus miss the opportunity to attend meetings. It is suggested that you watch the township's website for posting of agendas to review items that will be discussed at a town and/or committee meeting. The agendas for these meetings are posted on the township website at approximately 4 p.m. on the Friday prior to the meeting. Additionally, meeting schedules are also noted on the website for the public to view. If you wish to receive notices by email, it is suggested that you include your email address with your mailing address and your phone number on the attendance sign-in sheet. Thank you. And before I adjourn this public meeting, I was very, very remiss in not acknowledging the fact that Councillor Gannan had sent regrets for this evening in an abundance of time, as she had an overtaking issue that required her not to be in attendance this evening. Thank you. So, this public meeting with respect to the zoning bylaw amendment is concluded at 7:41. We will take a couple minutes just to change positions. The mayor, we are moving into council, and the mayor will take control of the meeting, and we just have to do some technology changes.